We can now bring in our international affairs editor, Philip Turle. Philip, great to see you. What happens if François Bayrou does, in fact, lose this vote? Talk us through the next steps.
Right, well, there are several possibilities. The first one is that, he's going to have to stand down. That will be the end of his government. He has to submit his resignation to President Macron. So the ball is in the camp of the French president, who then has to make a decision. Now, the prime minister is separate from the president. It's the president who names the prime minister, who then forms the government which governs the country. So it's President Macron's choice over who is prime minister. In theory, he can choose who he wants. In practice, it's probably better to choose someone from his own political camp than from an opposition camp, which means that he would be living in a situation of a lame duck president. The problem this time round is that President Macron doesn't have a majority in the National Assembly because he called early elections a year ago and lost those elections, which means he only has a relatively small relative majority in the National Assembly. He can't push through any policies. That's why we've seen François Bayrou in such a weak position trying to push these policies through to reboot France's economy. So in theory, he can name a new prime minister from whichever camp he likes. That's going to be very difficult for him to name anybody from his own camp. Or he can choose to call early legislative elections to try to regain a majority in the National Assembly. That looks like a long shot. Or final thing that he can do is to call early presidential elections and throw his hat in the ring, and there'll be a new president afterwards.
Given that Emmanuel Macron is a lame duck now, and he's going to wind up a lame duck no matter what happens, why not dissolve the National Assembly like the far right wants him to?
I think that the reason for that is that he already did this a year ago. He thought after the European elections that he was going to increase the size of his majority and then be able to push through policies, for example, reducing France's debt. Those elections were a disaster for President Macron because it was more of an opinion poll on what people thought of the president since he's been in office since 2017. So I think he's wary about doing that again right now. He's only got 2 years left in office, and this could be an extremely bad move for him to dissolve the National Assembly again. The problem is, if he doesn't dissolve the National Assembly and just names another prime minister, there have been 3 prime ministers since the last dissolution, just over a year ago, with Michel Barnier, who was prime minister for 3 months from September to December last year. Then we have the prime minister now, who is François Bayrou, and just before that there was Gabriel Attal. So there's a possibility that if he does name another prime minister now, we'll see the same scenario in a few months' time, another vote of no confidence, and the government will collapse and there'll be another prime minister, and this could carry on until the elections of 2027.
How likely is it that Emmanuel Macron will go ahead and choose someone like the far right's Jordan Bardella to be prime minister? Is that off the table?
That is, I think, almost 99.9% off the table. He would not choose anybody from the far right. There is in France what is called a Republican Front, which is the other parties coming together to prevent the National Rally or the former National Front from taking power. That is not as strong as it used to be. That's why the National Rally is calling for early legislative elections. They even want Emmanuel Macron to go and there to be presidential elections because they see now, they can smell blood. They see that Emmanuel Macron is weakened and it's their chance to take over the National Assembly. Of course, Emmanuel Macron knows this, so he's not going to give in to what they want. Certainly before the next presidential election, he will hold on to trying to create a government that he sees fit to introduce his plans. The problem is that government's going to find it very difficult to push any legislation through because the far left and the far right are both going to be up against it, saying that they will vote for another vote of no confidence. So we're going to go round in circles.